A tropical storm has swept away bridges and homes in eastern Zimbabwe, killing at least 31 people. Some sources are putting the toll to as high as 31, as we've already said. The cyclone has already caused widespread damage in Mozambique and Malawi. 19 people died in Mozambique. Cyclone Idai follows heavy rains in the country, which displaced 17,000 people. Well, the cyclone has also damaged infrastructure. More than 1.5 million people in 3 southern African countries have been affected by the storm. That's according to UN and government officials. South Africa's military has sent an aircraft with medical personnel to Mozambique and Malawi. Well, let's now cross live to CGTN's Farai Mwakatuya, who is in Harare for us. Farai, Zimbabwe's Ministry of Information has reported that at least 24, in fact, we're saying 31 people have been killed with dozens of others missing. Do you have an update on the situation there?
Well, indeed, Karen, 31 people confirmed dead, over 100 are missing and unaccounted for. And that is the latest update that we had from the Ministry of Information as at last night. The challenge that the ministry is facing, and indeed all Zimbabweans here are facing, is the fact that because of the trail of destruction that has been left by the cyclone, most of the communities in the affected areas have been cut off. The places are inaccessible because roads and bridges have been swept away. Communication, cell phone towers have been knocked down. Electricity pylons are also down. And so even people that we were in touch with are no longer reachable because they haven't been able to communicate via phone and also charge their mobile phones. And so they're out of touch now. So in terms of getting information, verifying that information requires physically going into some of those communities to get that information. And so there's been a slow stream of information coming through from those communities, but we expect those updates from the ministry as they have been giving them whenever they have that information. But just some other information for you is that President Emmerson Mnangagwa had left for a state visit to the United Arab Emirates. He's cut short that trip now and will be on his way back to address this ongoing disaster. He will also be appealing on his schedule there for funds to assist with this disaster. He's declared the Eastern Highlands area a state of national disaster, and we do know that rescue efforts continue there, marshalling resources from both the military, the police, and various civic society groups.
Well, as you say, it is a serious situation. The opposition says as much. As a humanitarian crisis unfolding in the country. What is happening? They're calling for state intervention. How are people coping there?
Well, we know that the situation is quite desperate within the affected areas. We know that some people are having to seek refuge in trees as they seek higher ground. We know some hotels and hospitals and facilities, schools in the area that are on higher ground have opened themselves up to anyone who is seeking refuge to go in there. But they will also require to feed those people, to provide shelter for those people, to provide medicines and healthcare for those people. And so that is the crisis that many people are speaking of here. And we've seen over the last few days, in addition to what the Civil Protection Unit, which is the government of department that is leading the relief efforts, in addition to what it is doing, we've seen ordinary Zimbabweans from different walks of life. We've seen corporate companies, banks, amongst others, setting up crowd funds and fundraising for people who've been affected by the cyclone. We've seen churches opening up their doors for people to drop in clothing, food, water, medicine, whatever it is that they have. So these drop-in centers have been set up today. We know that more will be opened up tomorrow as ordinary Zimbabweans come through and chip in whatever way they can. And I think that is a realization of the enormity of the task that will be required to address this crisis, to provide shelter for those people, but to ensure that they are able to get back to a decent way of life.
Well, as you say, it's an enormous situation there. There are reports that Idai may continue into early next week. How are the authorities going to cope with this worsening situation?
Well, I think what has hampered the rescue efforts at this point in time is the continued bad weather. Helicopters, choppers that have been secured from the Air Force have been largely unable to get into those areas so they can rescue people, so they can survey and just assess the situation on the ground. But we are told by Met Department officials that there will be a break, that the rainfall, the precipitation won't be as incessant. Yes, it will continue, but the intensity, the worst of it is between Saturday and today. And so going forward, yes, we'll continue to see this wet weather, but less in terms of intensity, and that will allow some of the authorities and the rescuers to be able to go in there. Government, as I said, has declared this area a state of national disaster, which means that it can now divert resources from other areas, make emergency responses to what's happening there, and hopefully put up a more robust response in terms of what's happening there. So we know that we will continue to see this weather, but what we're told is that it will dissipate. The cyclone will downgrade perhaps to a low pressure system. Yes, it will continue to be wet, but less intense, and hopefully that will see less lives lost and allow people to go in there to help those who need the assistance.
Okay, thank you very much for that update on Cyclone Idai. That was CGTN's Farai Makatuya there in Harare for us.